When you begin a research project, it is important to approach research as a process of inquiry. Experienced researchers recognize that research is an ongoing, iterative, and collaborative process that begins with a question or questions that are unresolved. Research is not a straightforward and linear process of retrieving information about a topic. Instead, it is often messy, without a clear starting point or even a clear right answer, and often requiring frequent revisions. Rather than finding a definitive answer, research findings often lead to new questions, which begins the process again. Because of the nature of the research process, it's important for the researcher to recognize the need for both patience and flexibility as part of the process. The idea of research as an ongoing process of inquiry is shared among researchers across disciplines, and it also underlies many of our research practices. For example, when selecting a research question, you will generally not want to select a question for which there is already a clear answer. Instead, you will want to identify those questions within your field that have not yet been answered, or those that have not yet been asked. In other words, as you develop a research question, it is important to try to identify the gaps in the literature in the field. It's also important to recognize that initial research questions can often be messy or half-formed. As you explore the literature, the research question is often revised based on initial findings. When you select a search tool, it's important that you consider whether the tool is one that will help you to find the sources that you need to answer your research question, to select search terms that are adequately reflective of your specific question, and to revise your search terms if needed. As you evaluate your sources, you need to think about not only whether a source is credible or whether or not you have a specific number of sources, but instead if and how the sources that you have found will help you to develop the answers to your research question. It's important to recognize that you will likely not find the one perfect source that has the right answer to the question that you have asked, because the questions that you ask will likely not have clear right answers at all. Instead, you will be expected to bring together the information from multiple sources to develop your own answer or interpretation, with the understanding that this will likely not be the final answer to the question. In summary, it's important that you approach research as an open-ended exploration that is driven by questions within your field that have not yet been answered. To develop your research question, you need to consider what the gaps in the existing literature are. You must also recognize that even if you develop an answer, it will likely not be the final answer. Because research is an iterative and messy process, it is important that you remain patient but adaptable, recognizing that you may have to revise your research question or your search statement multiple times. It's also important that you are able to accept ambiguity as part of this process, rather than expecting that you will always be able to find the one clear, right answer to your question.